Okay, so this beautiful Gantt-like looking timeline replaces the nightmare which was the course progress document in the Google Drive. So you see A1, primitive city, you build a city from the cubes and everything, and the kitchen set, that was assignment 1. It was due September 13th, but I've even extended that to October 13th. So if you haven't submitted A1, you can still submit A1 by October 13th. Okay. And then A2, those were the kitchen props, which were, you were to model a spoon, a teapot, a cup, all of those. They're also due October 13th. And then today we're getting started with UV mapping. So it just goes like that. So your CG asset of choice, I've made this optional. So all the stuff with all the milestones and everything, there are no more milestones. You need to be setting your own milestones if you want to be doing A6. You have to sort of have a timeline figured out for, I think, in order to be able to complete it for the delivery. But it's optional. So you can choose to not do it. So the minimum requirements for the course would be A1 to A5, which are all submitted for your portfolio. You have a question? No. Okay. So I think the minimum requirements then, they should be pretty okay. You know, it's just like the kitchen set, the kitchen furniture, the props, and then you will UV map all of those things and texture them. Questions?
Originally, the A1 to A5 were not graded.
Yes.
But now they will be graded?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's a good point. So originally these were just like what you call like the workload, which is pass or fail. Now they will all be a part of your portfolio assignment. So yes, they will all sort of factor into the evaluation, which means if you want to resubmit some of it, don't bother with it. The primitive city and the kitchen, who cares? It's like, it's very simple. The requirements for these, you know, well, okay, redo it. If you opted to do the table by just making a cube, then redo it. Okay. The point is you need to show like a minimum amount of modeling skills. Okay. I will be submitting one more document. Okay. I promise I won't be killing you with a lot of documentation, but I will be making one which are the assessment criteria. But they're pretty simple. Okay. This is not. I'm not saying the course is simple. I know there's a lot to take in. Okay. But in terms of the requirements, it's pretty simple for these. But if you want to resubmit, you can do that until October 13th. You can resubmit the primitive city and the kitchen set. Yeah.
What's the status?
What's that? Okay. Oh yeah. So I added something called the status report. That's like a half an hour video report. No, I'm just kidding. This is one page, maximum 2 pages of images. It's just screen grabs of whatever it is that you're doing. Okay? Screen grabs. It's nothing. And then you write one paragraph about, like, okay, I'm doing this. It's going well. I have no problems. See you later. Or highlight some issues. If you're having some issues, you need to highlight what issues you're having. It's like a one-page deal, and then you throw that in there. So the whole point with the video reflections, obviously, were that I were to give you feedback on them. But it took me like a workday to download all the 100 ones I told you, and then, you know, to me, I don't care if we don't do them. I mean, to me, it's great. So then I will give you short, quick, and dirty feedback on the status report. That's the point. So it's like a midpoint, quick evaluation. Okay, great. Question? Someone had a question.
So short notes are something we need for the like regular assignments?
What's your question?
So such workbooks we do for the regular assignments.
Right. So now there's no distinction. There's no regular assignments or irregular assignments. It's all assignments. All of these are to be submitted. All of them will be a part of your portfolio. Okay? So in this course, well, it's always been a portfolio assessment. So you deliver everything. So I could have done this initially, you know, but initially this was just pass or fail, and then this was the one you were being graded on, right? To put it simply. But now all of this will be included in the assessment. The status report you won't be evaluated on at all. You just need to throw something in there. Well, I shouldn't say that. If you don't do the status report, then that's not good. But you just do a page. It's nothing. It's just like an image, what you're doing. Okay. Now, and then A6 is optional, but you know, if some of you are striving for like a good grade, it's good to do it. Okay. I'm not saying it's impossible to achieve a decent grade just doing these and do a good job. But you know, for an A, typically, you need to show a little bit more than just applying all the basics. You need to show that you're putting it in your own, being a little bit creative. You know, that's really the whole point of making your own asset. Yeah, you have another question.
So if I decide to do the last assignment, do I need to do like status reports for that as well?
No. See here, there is no status report for that. There's no milestones. There's no nothing.
Let's say I have an issue with the milestone.
Then you contact me. You're always free to welcome me to contact me at any time. You know, you can send me your files. I can take a look at your files. Okay. You're right. So I don't like the OneDrive solution. It's very slow. But I think we'll make a OneDrive thing with your name. So if you want to put your files in there for me to take a look at, you can do that. Right. Yeah. Or just send me an email with the file, whatever. No, the only thing here is that you do the reflection paper, but you will also submit. All right, so that's the course progress. Any other questions regarding the course progress? It's pretty clear. Yeah.
Delivery is always important.
Yeah. So next point. So let's go to assignment 1. So you were also confused with all the naming conventions and everything. So this was one of the feedback. You wanted each assignment as a PDF, and I think that's a good idea. So here you have all the PDFs for all the assignments. So you see, okay, this one is due by extended to October 13th. And then this is what you need to deliver. Reflection paper to Frontier. Okay, this is the naming convention. And then you submit the Maya project. This is frankly more for like archival purposes, so we have the file, right? I'm not going to really go in there. I'm going to read this, right? This is what the censors, for your evaluation, this is the important thing. But then you will submit the files, and you do this to the server. You know, you've already done this, right? You have a file there, A1, and this is the naming convention for the Maya project folder. Is that okay? And for this particular one, there's no status report because there's no point because it's already done. Yeah, so that's it. So that's the same for each assignment. So it just says here reflection paper. This is the exact name. This is the Maya project folder. Assignment 3. Here's the status report. Yes, it's supposed to be delivered on Frontier by this time. Right? Okay. Other questions? So it's all clear, finally. All right. So it's a bit simplified, or it's a lot simplified, and I think the requirements, you know, it's not a lot, frankly. No, it's doable. So even if you're like, I heard some people haven't gotten started with Maya, well, I can't really, that's up to you. If you haven't opened Maya, But you can still do this. You have till October 13th. Review all the previous lectures, have all recorded. This course, you can't just watch the lecture once. You really have to go back to the lectures and just sit down with the recording and and also other resources. I'm not your only resource. There's a whole World Wide Web full of resources, and you have each other. But I think that my lectures show you a very basic approach and a smart approach. So like modeling from planes is a very good idea. Modeling with quads, just building up the topology. Because it's a very easy, simple way to quickly get legal topology. It's just a simple way of working. So if you haven't, at least you need to set aside a work day, a week, just and repeat the lecture, go over it. It's a grind, but that's it. This stuff doesn't get fun until you really master all the basics, and then it starts getting fun. But this course it's both an introduction to Maya and it's also an intro to modeling. So I do realize it's quite a lot to take in. Yeah. So enough said about this. If it's all clear. Let's see what else I put in there. Oh, technical checklist. Maybe I'll update this, but it's just a very short little thing. So just a general thing, that you should be using Maya project folders. If you don't know how to use a Maya project folder, you need to review lecture 1. Scene files. It's preferably MA, MB, okay. It should be placed in the scenes. You should save iteratively. So make a habit. Save scene 01, 02, 03, 04, 05. So that you can go back, but also, it's just a great way to work. Structured outliner. I could have put more stuff in there. And modeling. Delete history. Freeze transformations on all the objects. Avoid unmerged vertices per object. So if you have, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to review lecture 2. Ensure conform normals. We talked about normals. The polygons have a front side and a back side. They should all be facing the same way. It shouldn't be flipped. No visible back faces. Manifold mesh. We talked about that. No areas with only a single polygonal thickness. Also, you should bevel the contour edges for hard-edged objects. That's if you're not subdividing it. So that we'll never have an object that only has like a Maya edge thickness on the corners, because light is not hitting the corner. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go back to lecture 2. No n-gons. That's faces with more than 4 sides. We don't want that. No extreme non-planar. So okay. So Maya has a feature in there. It's a cleanup tool. We talked about that. It shows you. You can make it show all the non-planar faces. So non-planar faces are just like faces that are skewed off, so they're not really planar. Okay, but it's very strict. The feature in Maya, don't rely on that. Just rely on your own judgment. If you feel that a polygon is like a piece of paper, right? So there's limits to what you can do with it. So if it's like really bending and stretching, because then you rather add more edge loops, so you have 2 polygons. Simple as that. Well, no, I'll stop saying that. It's not simple, but that's it. No extreme non-planar faces. It's pretty obvious, though, right? If you see that a polygon is just trying to twist and bend in ways that it can't, then it's not going to work. Logical topologies. What I'm saying, when you're building up things either from a cube or a plane, and you're just extruding, you're working always with quads. You're just building up gradually. Especially when you're building subdivision models. So you're building up what you call the polygonal cage, right, which is driving the subdivision. When you're doing it that way, and you're also using smooth, maybe, like first you establish the main shapes, and then at one point you use the smooth to establish the shape. I'm happy with it. It's a very nice, natural way to arrive at a very logical topology. It just has to do with the way you're working. There's so many ways of arriving at a mesh, right? You can, so many different ways. you can do Boolean operation. You can do like create polygon tool and then convert it. You can do like a NURBS thing and convert it. A lot of these methods, and that's what I'm saying, if you watch a lot of tutorials online, there's a lot of good tutorials, but there's also a lot of tutorials that are maybe not really made by modelers. Maybe some other people have other fields of interest in CG, and they might not be the best ones. So there's a lot of them out there that uses a lot of Booleans, which you can like carve out things from meshes to arrive at shapes. The Booleans in Maya are pretty crap, but there are new ones in ZBrush that are excellent. But for what we're doing now, you don't want to do that. Okay, you really want to get it into your fingertips, working this basic way. Then you'll arrive at a logical topology. You want a middle dividing edge loop in symmetrical objects, so that it can easily be cut in half, and that should be on x0, because the width should always be the x-axis. All right, so, and we probably could put a lot more there, but that's what I'd put, just a brief little checklist. And the UVs, which we'll start talking about now. So, okay, so, and also you want just a brief little overview of all the course contents. So I did that. So this is just a description of the sessions, just very briefly, just tells you all the sessions, a couple pages. So I tried to simplify it. I think it's better. It doesn't need to be that complex. And then there's the deliver instructions, but I think it's pretty self-evident. But here's what you probably already read about how you can do the critical reflection papers, status report. It's a very, very short thing, blah, blah, blah. And then also how to submit your files, but I'm sure you probably know that by now. All right. And that's it. And then, like I said, I will post an assessment criteria, which is a little bit more specific as to what the sensors will look at. So I will also be evaluating it, but there's one more internal examinator, and then if you challenge the grade, it will be an external examinator. So that's the way that works. All right. Other concerns? This is your moment of asking questions about the course content. If not, I will assume now we're all on board. Yes?
It was about maps. We only do color maps?
No. So, where is it? There it is. Yes. So, okay, so I said something about that. Yeah, we'll only do color maps because I thought today we would do a recap of modeling, but I changed my mind. We will not. We will start doing UV mapping. We need to get started with that, and then next time we'll do color maps. Oh, here's another little thing that I did. So you'll notice that. Yeah. So answer your question first. Yes. No. We will also be doing other maps. So that will be this session 5. We'll have a look at other image maps. Okay, but this is non-PBR rendering, which is simple. No, I will not say that anymore. I'm sorry. It's doable. It's like we'll do a spec map and a bump map, look at an emissive map, how you get an alpha, like transparency if you wanted to. It's pretty fun. Yeah, and then that's it. So yeah, so we will be doing other maps. Good question. Other questions? Oh, sorry.
The optional thing you can make is that can you make whatever now, or should it still not be non-organic?
No, you can make whatever. Yeah. But the same thing applies to, you need to really show that it's your the steps you've taken. Oh, so that's a good point, because even though this is optional, like if you choose to submit something and you don't really show your progress, that's really no good, right? So it's all the same requirement, right? But yeah. you can do something organic if you want to. I don't really care. You can, whatever you want to do. Yeah. Organic stuff is harder. Yeah.
So what you're saying is if you're opting for the A6,
Yes.
there also a reflection paper to it? Like
You will hand in a reflection paper. See here?
Only one, right?
Only one. One, no, or not so large. It's the same as the rest. The main thing with the reflection papers is that you show your process, right? You reflect and show your process.
What about status reports? Do we need to give them for A6 or no?
No status reports for A6. Only the final reflection paper. Yeah, so obviously A6 will be a part of the evaluation. If you do it, it can count towards helping the grade. If you're shooting for an A, you have to do A6. There's no way of getting an A if you don't do the A6. Yeah.
Will we be getting individual feedback on the reflection papers as we hand them in?
No, not initially. You'll get individual feedback on the status reports. Quick and dirty feedback. So, for the reflection papers, the way this works, okay, you will do all the reflection papers by the deadline, but the final hand-in will be through Inspera. So, at the end here, you will resubmit all of them to Inspera. Okay, so yeah, at some point here, we'll do a feedback session on the reflection papers. The point is you can perfect them before you hand them in. Like, if you wanted to make some changes, you can do it before you hand it into Inspera, which is the final portfolio delivery. So I haven't really written anything about that because I needed to check with student administration if this was okay. And this is totally fine. Because the way of assessment in the course has always been portfolio. So having all of these a part of the portfolio is totally fine. Yeah, so if I were to do feedback on this, for instance, I don't want to do that because I'd rather be giving feedback on these because these are the midway points and you're able to change things in your work based on the feedback. If I'm giving feedback on the reflection paper, it's only to perfect the reflection paper. It's not what you're currently working on, right? Because when you do the reflection paper, you're done with that task. So I'd rather do if you want feedback on the reflection papers, I'd rather do that later when you're perfecting the reflection papers, before you hand them in. But the feedback should be to help your work, like what you're currently working on. So ideally, you would have already gotten feedback from me, but like I said, also for me, it was a bit challenging with the video thing. Not very practical. But anyways, so ideally you would have had status reports here as well, so my bad. I need to streamline the feedback a little bit because there's a lot of people. Other questions? Seems like questions come if we wait long enough. Now it seems no more questions. Let me try to set a date out here somewhere for the feedback for the reflection papers. But that is if you want to perfect it before you hand it in. Serves no other purpose. All right, I think that's it. Then I'll add the assessment criteria, and then I'll also add information about the final delivery. Or you'll get that from the student administration, because they handle that. And that's in a different system. Well, you've tried it before. In Spera, right? You've done that. No, you've never done that. It's a different system. It's the same thing. You upload some files. Yeah, same shit. In Spera, it's called. Okay, let's take a short break. Let's do a 10-minute break. Then we'll get started with UV mapping. So come back, be prepared for a new input of the delightful world of CGArt. It'll be fun, I promise. All right. So, who can tell me what UV mapping is all about?
I think I know it. Basically, you take the model, you hold it flat, and you just put texture on it.
Yeah, that's it. So, before you can add textures to an object, we do need to make a flat version of the object so that we have something as a reference in Photoshop. So that's all it is. We need to make a flat version of the 3D object. So in Maya, to see this flat version, which is in the UV space, you have to go to UV, and you have something called UV editor. So this is a new world, UV world. In this editor, we'll only be working with the UVs. So if I right click, you can see that I can't really select vertices. I can select faces though. But here are the UVs. So what are the UVs? It's another component type. Right? So we have vertices. The vertex points we can actually grab here and move around in world space, right? But if I select UVs, and I select the UV in here, and I try to move it in world space, you can't. So you can't manipulate the UVs over here in world space at all, right? I can't move them. The only way to move UVs is in here, UV texture editor. So I go UV, and here I can grab, and I can start moving it. So the UV coordinates, you can see that it's a coordinate system, and it has its origin here. You see the green y-axis and x-axis. And we're going to be, eventually, all the UVs will be placed within this quadrant. So this is called, let me just say the 0 to 1 quadrant, right here. So all the UVs, eventually, when you're done with UV mapping, they need to be within this quadrant. And they can't be like almost within it. Like if this UV point is a little bit like that, that's not okay. So technically, scary things can happen. We make sure the UVs are within 0 to 1. So we won't be doing that in this class, but you can see that the UVs just continue seemingly forever. There's a lot of what we call UDIM patches. This we get back to for those who are doing VFX. For games, so this is not so important, but for VFX, if you have a creature, we lay it out over several UDIM patches. We don't do that here, so all is going to be within this quadrant. But that's why there's a lot of patches here. You can extend it. Okay, right. So that's just, this is what is called a UV layout. This is just the default UV layout for the cube. There's any infinite number of ways you can arrange the UVs, right? It could be anything. There's no way of telling. This is just the default layout for the Maya primitive cube. I can do another one. Let's do the sphere. This is just the default UV layout for the sphere. So you see all these polygonal primitives, they come with UVs assigned. right? But when, all right, so when I start doing something though, like we model, so I go here and I go face and I start extruding, so I go Control E and I extrude up. You can see that nothing happens in the UVs. So it's not like the UVs update, right? So the original UV solution is only viable for the primitive in its primitive state. Whenever you start modeling, the UVs don't update. That's why we have to make UVs before we can texture. So right now there's a lot of UVs here. Specifically, if you think about it, which ones of the polygons do you think are not currently occupying any space in UV world? Does anyone have any idea? What's that? Yeah, the ones I just made. So which are those? Top ones? So except the very top one. Because that one was there, right? Yeah, so these ones. So you can see when I click these are newly created polygons and they have 0 space in UV world. You see this one has, because that one was actually there originally. I just extruded it up, right? Right, so exactly. So the new polygons, they don't have any space here in UV world. So what do you think that's going to do if I apply a texture to this object? What do you think that's going to look like on these? Very stretched. Why would they appear very stretched? Right. These, if I apply a texture to this, the texture will appear very, very stretched along these polys because you're actually only showing like a pixel or something of that texture. Okay, so this is going to become more clear. So let's get a texture in here. So if you go to if you Google, you can Google checker pattern, checkerboard pattern, or UV pattern. You'll find a lot of these checkerboard patterns. There's also a checkerboard pattern in Maya, but I just like downloading them, so I have this texture. So there's a lot of like creative ones here, you know. So this one is incidentally in 512 by 512, which is a very standard texture resolution. So I think we briefly mentioned it, but we're going to stick to 1 by 1 image resolutions for the textures. So typically, practically speaking, that would be either like 128 maybe, or 256, like it's a really low res texture for a game, like 256, 512, 1024, 2048. 4096. So just doubling every time. Those are the most common texture resolutions. So 512 by 512, pretty common. This, you don't have to. It could be like 500 by 500, but it's just keeping things a little easy on the computational side. You know, we just stick to those numbers. It works nice in a binary world. All right, So I made a Maya project. So you should always now really get into the habit of working in Maya projects. Whenever you start something, you make a Maya project. And then I'm going to put it in source images. Source images is the directory in which all the images that go into a material should be placed. So not in images, but in source images. What? Oh, okay. I think I just download whatever I'm doing here. So that checker. .512, so I know the resolution. Okay, just a normal JPEG. Now that's in there. So I'll go to rendering editors, hypershade. This is the hypershade. This is the Lambert that's initially on every object. So I won't start assigning anything to the Lambert. So leave the Lambert alone. If you wanted a Lambert, just make a new Lambert. This is Lambert. I don't want the Lambert. I'm going to make a blend. Blend shader, been around forever. It's one of these legacy old materials that are in Maya. Middle mouse button, click and drag, drop it on there. To double check if that material is assigned, I can right click and hold, select objects with material. Yes, blend 1 is assigned to this. I can double click and rename it if I want. I'm not going to do that. Then I go in here, color. So I double click the material, double click, click once for color, and I'll attach a file node. The filter type I can turn off. Filter type is like a blur. Blurs a little bit. It's to prevent flickering and animation, but I can turn this off. Then you see it will go directly to the source images directory. Then this is my JPEG. Open. Nothing happens because I need to click number 6 on the keyboard. So 4, 5, 6. I can toggle between the different view modes. There's the texture version. So as we predicted, this just looks crazy. Because these faces are occupying just a very, very little space here in UV world. So let me try to make that. If I copy or make a polygonal plane, it doesn't need any subdivisions. Then I can just apply the same material. So middle mouse button, click and drag. So the same material can be applied to how many objects you want. So let's explain this by looking at this plane, because it's maybe a little bit easier. So you can see the plane is just okay. So here in the UV editor, you have this image. This will turn on and off the preview of the underlying image. It's just a preview in here. If I turn it off, nothing happens. It's still there. It's just not visible. Oh, there's the internal checkerboard. Does it have numbers on it? No. Yeah, it kind of does. But anyways, the numbers are also nice because you can see if the UVs are flipped. Anyways, so now the plane is just occupying perfectly 0 to 1 space, the Maya polygonal primitive plane. So it's just showing this texture just beautifully right away. Just like when you attach an image plane, if it's a 1-to-1 image ratio, like we were doing, it's just going to show nice on the plane without any distortion because the UVs are perfect. But I can obviously go here and just grab this UV and start pulling that UV. So pay attention, like what do you think happens to the texture? So I start dragging this UV down. You see the texture instantly updates. So this is not magic, it's just like whatever is underneath this representation of the polygon, whatever is underneath here in the texture, as far as texture, is going to be applied over here. So if I turn it like that, you see it's just going to go straight at diagonal across all the red lines. A lot of stretching though. Right? So that's why there's a lot of stretching in the other case, because if it's only occupying this much space in UV world, we go in here and see it's actually showing only those pixels. That's what you're seeing here. So that's texture distortion, right? So poorly laid UVs, you will see that when you apply the checkerboard pattern, you'll see artifacts like this. So in your reflection report, you will be also submitting an image file. So this is all described hopefully pretty well in the paper. You need to submit an image with a checkerboard applied, because it's just to show that there's a minimum texture distortion. So then I can also scale it down. I can scale it down uniformly and it's not going to do anything it's not going to introduce any stretching. I'm just scaling it up or down. So let's say I wanted to fill this entire plane with a number 7. I can place it right there. Now the plane is number 7, and I'm happy. Very nice. But why is this not such a great UV solution? I mean, there's no texture distortion, but there's something else not so ideal. What's that? The image, yeah. So the image quality sucks. But I can say, well, that's okay, because I'm only going to be observing it from here, so that's fine. But why is it still not such a great solution? Yeah. Exactly. We're wasting space, and that's bad because we're using data. There's data in the scene that's not being used. So that's obviously critical for games. It's also a huge issue in VFX. We always want to maximize the use of the UV space, but for games it's like mission critical. If you had a in-game asset that looked like this, it would be very, very inefficient because you're wasting all this data. So you have all these pixels are still being read, but you're not making use of them. So of course, if you only wanted the number 7 and you say, okay, but I'm happy with that resolution, well, then you need to make an image. You go in Photoshop and you make a little really, really low resolution image, which in this case would be like what, 512 divided by 10, so 51.2 pixels in the width. Right? That's what you would do. And then you would have a 1-to-1 image ratio with that resolution that you would apply to the plane. What's that? Yeah, you're right. Divided by 8. Thank you. The number of, yeah, so these are 8. Yeah. Good call. Yeah, but this is the logic that you have to start applying. So it's always about maximizing the usage of 0 to 1, also 0 or as minimum, as little as possible texture distortion. So any questions about this? This is just the basics of how this correlation works. So, okay. Okay, so our shader is still here, so I can just apply it. So we're not going to spend any time at all doing any sort of unwrapping in Maya. So unwrapping is a process where if you have a slightly more complex object or model, you have to make a flat version of it, right? And sometimes that's a little more tricky. The more complex the shape, the more complex the object, the trickier it gets getting that nice representation with minimum texture distortion. So in Maya, you can go in there, and the tools have gotten better, you know. But we're going to be using another software for the actual unwrapping. So today, we're not going to spend time doing that. We're going to do that in the lab tomorrow. I'm going to show you another tool. So today is really important that you really understand how UVs work. If not, there's no, you'll be lost tomorrow. I just want you to try this. So, okay. So like I said, in Maya though, okay, so now they have similar tools to what we will be looking at. So some people choose always to do this in Maya. If you want to figure out this on your own, I don't use these tools. But I use another program called Hedda's UV Layout Pro. So this is a software that's only dedicated to UV mapping. It's very powerful. And that's what we're going to be looking at in the lab. And that's for actually unwrapping, like making the flat version of more intricate objects. But like for something like this, we could also just do, in here there are these different types of doing this. So for instance, automatic mapping. If I click it, you can see that it's a projection based way of going about this. So it's like it's taking pictures of the object and then just displaying the result over here in UV space, right? So this is the projection. You can see that the cube is very simple. It's just taking a projection, 6 sides, and then over here you get the result. So if I start rotating the projection, things are not so great, because now it's looking from an angle over here at these. So this is sort of the way I would approach it using this system. It's more like a projection-based thing. It's like you're taking photos of the mesh and then you're stitching them together afterwards, right? So that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm not going to be spending time doing. The alternative to this projection-based way of doing it, like taking photos, is to actually just go in here and treat this as if it were a box that you would just have in front of you and start cutting it up. So I would say, cut it here and cut it here. And then you would use an algorithm to just make it flat. Right, so you just cut and make it flat. So I'm saying Maya has those tools now. So you can experiment with them. Maybe they're good. They used to be a little, sometimes you get uneven texel density, like some of the polys would not be so optimized. So I still prefer headers. But yeah, but you see the difference. That's sort of the main 2 different approaches at unwrapping. One is the projection-based thing, one is the actual cutting and unwrapping using an algorithm. So now we have a completely different layout. It's totally fine. They're all within 0 to 1. It's just a different layout. They're placed differently. But there's no texture distortion. And the other thing is that we have a uniform texel density. So what's the texel density? It's these little checkerboards are the same size everywhere. Meaning the texture resolution would be equal everywhere. So if I right click here, I can select UV shell. UV shell means all the UVs that are connected and merged together. So you see this is a UV shell. So currently I have a solution where all the polys are each of their own little UV shell. So what I don't want to do is scale any of these independently of the other one. So I don't want to do this. You see that the checkerboard actually gets larger on the object when I scale it down. Why does it get larger?
Because it stretches the images.
Yeah, but yeah, it stretches it. But why does it get larger?
It zooms in.
It zooms in. So what happens in effect? What can you say about this polygon now? In simple terms, about the texture. Huh? The quality is shit. In other words, doesn't have the same texture size. How is the texture size different? Yes. Right? Yeah. So the texel density is different. We no longer have a conformed texel density, but the resolution for this polygon is smaller. Right? We have less resolution here. Why do the checkerboards get bigger? Because we're just zooming in on the image, right? Like you were saying. But making this smaller over here would make the checkers bigger because we're just focusing in. And if I go really, really small, I can go all the way in there. Now it's really crappy. Right? So to check the texel density, that means applying a checkerboard and then seeing, are the checkerboards even? And I can see right away, no, this is much, much larger. And then in some cases, we just go in here and we say, wow, let me eyeball that. You know, I go that, and you sort of match it up. It doesn't have to be rocket science accurate, you know, because it's just going to be off maybe by a couple pixels or something. In the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. So there you go. That's it. Great. So why would I want this sort of layout, not the other one? Just imagine if you're in Photoshop and you're starting to texture. So this is not so relevant for a cube, but just imagine if this were, let's say, a tire or something, and you needed a texture to run across, let me go like this, all these faces. So this face path, not the ones on the side, but this face path, you're going to go in Photoshop, and you're going to make a texture that just flows nicely across all of those faces. Like if it were, like I said, a tire, and you would have uniform texture along that face path, right? That's difficult to achieve with this layout, because I would have to go in Photoshop and I say, okay, so I'm matching this. Okay, so what am I looking at? I go to edge mode and I go, okay, so that edge continues over here. What is going on? Why does this edge continue over there? What's happening? Yes? Yeah, those two faces are joined together. So this edge, now this is where it gets confusing. This edge is actually one edge. It's one, well, technically it's two edges merged together. But in world space over here is one edge, right? So over here, see that's one edge because it's two joining polys. So if I select that edge and it continues over there, because like you said, this is where it continues. So this polygon, if I go to face mode, I say this polygon is that polygon, this polygon is that polygon. But it could be organized any way in UV space. You don't know, right? So that's why this gets confusing. So the whole point with UV layout is that you make a layout that's sort of paintable. Makes sense for the texture artist, which in this case you are yourself. You will be painting. This is not a very optimal solution for something that needed to have a coherent texture. If in another case, maybe that's not the case. Maybe completely different. You don't have that concern, then this would be okay. All right. So how do I now? If I want to change this, how do I join these? So we have cut and sew together. So cut and sew. You can hit Shift X and Shift S. Okay. Let me tear this menu off. So also there's a tool called Move and Sew Together. That will actually move it and merge them together like that. But it's only in UV space. Doesn't change anything in world space. And then I right click and hold UV shell. Now these are combined. So when I'm working, I can work anywhere in world space. I can go over here, I can zoom out, I can be working anywhere. Doesn't matter. At the end, I will make sure everything fits within 0 to 1. All right, and then I can keep joining. Let's say now I want to join in. All right, so, okay, let's say I want this face path to be coherent. So I want to join this polygon to it. All I have to do is select this edge. See, sure enough, there it is. And then move that one and sew it together. And then the last one, oops, it's this one, but I can just select this edge and see that there's that edge and move and sew. Now if I go to UV shell, you see that now this is a UV shell. All these 4 polygons are part of the same UV shell. So now you can imagine in Photoshop it would be very simple. You can go just paint, it will just flow across all those spaces. And then of course it would be, now if it's to occupy that much space, it would need to be scaled down because to fit within 0 to 1. So like I said, this is all relative, right? I can just scale this up. I can be working wherever I want to in here, it doesn't matter. But in the end, I need to scale everything, make sure it fits within this quadrant, 0 to 1. So what I don't want to do, so you notice I didn't just take this one and scale that down, so that would again not give me a uniform pixel density. So there we go. So this could be a layout for it. So you can see that the necessity of having it one shell makes for less usage of UV space. So it's always this, back and forth. You have to consider what's best. Can I live with actually cutting it up there? It means it's going to be a little more difficult to match the texture, but I can make more usage of UV space. And then I can cut it open again. Cut. And then I go UV shell, and I can move it down here. Now I have more. Now they're smaller. I can place them in here, select all of them at once, and just scale them up. As long as I'm scaling it all at once, I'm just maintaining the same. Whoops. Yeah, I can merge these, I guess. Or not. Yeah, so this is what I want you to do. Just like fiddle around with this, just try it. So now this is a completely different layout than the original Maya primitive. Okay. Fine. Let me save the scene. UV mapping is not the most fun subject. Yep. Okay, so the snapping functions? Right. Oh, okay. So why would you not want to join them? Yeah. What's that? You're having? Oh, so you mean you want them overlapping? Overlapping? Yeah, you can have. You can technically have overlapping UVs per object, but you won't. It's not optimal because we won't be doing it in this course. But if you have an asset with overlapping UVs per object, you will have problems with baking. So baking means like if you have some high definition detail you want to be baking down into a normal map, things like that. But you can yeah, it's going to be a workaround. But the best thing here is for your sake is to build assets right now that don't have overlapping UVs per object. You can have overlap. You can have multiple objects sharing the same UV space, but you can't have overlapping UVs per object.
No, I wasn't actually talking about overlapping. I was talking about the way you split up the cubes to maximize the UV space, right?
Right.
Yeah. They're not straight. You want them aligned, or you can actually have the texture in about you just copy it over.
All right. Okay. I see. So okay. So you want these aligned. Okay. I'm a bit slow. I don't know if the snapping functions work. No. So it should work, right? They really? Yeah. So yeah. Because I'm pressing V to snap to point, but it's not letting me snap in here. So I mean, it should be no problem for it to do that. And I don't know why it's not in there. Maybe there's a way to do it. But the way to align things, there's no. Okay, so there's a new align tool. So that seems great, which I haven't tried. Okay, so they changed obviously everything again, and I haven't looked at everything. But the old way of doing it. They removed it from the shelf. It used to be on the shelf. Yeah, I don't know where they put it. I'll have to look into it. But it used to be, you can actually, if you select this UV, there used to be a simple tool here. You can make it snap to the other UV along the x-axis, for instance. Wait a minute. So now it seems the snapping works. Okay. So it doesn't work in UV shell mode. But it works in UV mode, it seems. So then I can hold V. Or now it's not working. Yeah, it is working. Okay, it's a little. It is working. Okay. So ignore everything I said. Snapping works if you're in UV mode, and then just gradually snapping to the UVs you want to be snapping. So that's a bit, yeah. So, but there are some new align tools there, and it's probably better. What's that? I can't hear you. I'm going vertical. Seems fiddly. Now I can't snap again. Oh, there it goes. Okay. So these are annoying tools, anyways. Yeah, prefer the other tool. Maybe I can snap edges. That would be nice. Nope. Well, that's not a good idea anyways, because then I'm selecting multiple UVs. Let me try to dig through this later, and I'll try to find the old align tool where they hit it, because it worked pretty nice. But anyways, yeah, so, oops. So how do we get this out of here and to Photoshop? That's the whole point of doing this, right? Hello. What's going on? All right, great. You're going to blur me out, right?
Yeah.
Great. So how do we get this out of here? There is something called PSD networks. We won't be using PSD networks. Some people use PSD networks. They're not very good. Because if we, for instance, add a lot of blending modes, which we will look at, the blending modes don't transfer very well between Photoshop and Maya. So we're not going to be using it. UV snapshot. Yes? No, no worries.
You could just rasterize the blending layers in Photoshop and save it, and then show up Maya instantly. And if you don't like changes you make, just Control V and go back to the blending mode. So why not use PSD networks?
Why not use PSD networks? Because it's unnecessary. Because the only benefit of using PSD networks is that you can open the PSD file, and then you have to follow the stringent method it uses and the naming convention it needs to have. So it freezes you up from being creative in Photoshop. Okay, so the only benefit of using it is that you can click reload PSD network. Right? That's the only benefit. Is you save the PSD file and then you click reload PSD network. Yes. So you're saying, what if you flatten all the layers and then click? Yeah, maybe, if you want to experiment with it. My recommendation is, to me, it makes no sense because I need to be really creative in Photoshop. I want to be able to add any number of layers, any number of blending modes I want. And then, yeah, I guess in some cases you can try PSD networks. What I'm saying is, in a larger pipeline, it's not used. It's just, you're very limited with it. And it's really, the gain is very minimal, okay? Because you'll see when we make an image file, all we have to do is right-click and reload the image file. So there is a little bit of back and forth because you have to save out a new image file all the time. Or you don't save out a new one, you save the previous one. Just replace it. So, but the UV snapshot is really just like a screen grab of 0 to 1. And that's all it is. It just gives you a reference to look at when you start texturing in Photoshop. Yep.
How many UV edits now in the image? I don't see the snapshot option.
Okay, are you in object mode on your model? Oh, it should show. It shows anyways now. Do you have Maya 2017?
Yes.
Image at the bottom, UV snapshot. Okay. We'll have to look at that. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a different patch or something. It used to be under File, I think. But image UV snapshot, and also it used to be for this to work, you needed to be in object mode. Anyways, there you go. UV snapshot, boom. And then we save it out. It's going to go to images. It's going to be called out UV. And here, again, 256, kind of standard resolution. The UVs are relative, right? So you can apply any texture resolution to this UV configuration. It could be anything. It could be 4K, 8K, anything, right? So what I actually save out the UV layout as doesn't matter. It's just an image. It in no way limits the resolution that you're able to apply to this object, right? But I might as well just do something that's going to correspond to what I will be doing here. So whatever, let's do like a 2048 by 2048, 2K texture. And then I'm going to change the format, just do a JPEG, whatever. So you see it's sampling from 0 to 1, so that's what we want, that's here. And then OK. And like I said, it's beneficial if you're in object mode when you're doing that. Did you find your UV snapshot? Okay. If you really can't find it, another way would be you would do a print screen of this. That's all it does. It does a print screen of 0 to 1, and then you have a perfect reference for texturing in Photoshop. So then let's go to Photoshop. Where's Photoshop? All right. So who here? Oh, question.
The UV editor, you go on polygons and far further down that is on our computers.
On your computers. Okay. All right. Okay. So in the student version of Maya, the UV snapshot is under polygons. So that's good to know. So if you're on the student version, go to polygons, UV snapshot. Just find it somewhere. UV snapshot. If you can't find it, you can do print screen. You just get that 0 to 1 out there somehow. And then open. And it should be in images. So this is in my, so there it is, just a JPEG. It's a 2048 by 2048 JPEG. And this is it. So it comes initially in as a locked layer like anything in Photoshop. If you double click the layer and name it something, so this will be UV, there you go. And now we can start texturing. So if you go to textures.com, we've been here before, I think. There's a lot of texture references. So you can search for things. So when you're looking for texture references, so we'll get back to this obviously, but you really want something that does not have a lot of highlights or shadows. So in other words, a pretty diffuse looking texture. It's a pretty washed out look. That's what you want, because all the shadows and highlights, those are things that you want the material to do in your 3D render. So this should be just the diffuse color. Sometimes it's called diffuse color map, albedo map. We're going to call it a color map.
Also, if you're shooting pictures yourself, be sure to mainly photograph the objects either in an overcast day or bring the object you shoot into the shadows.
Yes, you bring it into the shadows to create an overcast day, right?
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah, so avoid any hard sunlight. Overcast days are great for texture references. You should all run outside and shoot pictures. Let me download this. Do you shoot a lot of texture references, Thomas? Yeah, I mean, using your own texture references is a great thing to do. Makes it more your own. What's my password? I don't know. Hey. Alright. Let's download this guy. So, normal JPEG. This is currently not in one-to-one. That's fine. I'm gonna copy this. This is just a texture reference that I'm going to be using. But I'm going to put it in images, just so I have it in here. And then I'm going to open that in Photoshop. So there it is, another file. Then to get that into the other document, this is currently just a JPEG that's opened, right? But I'm going to save this document as a PSD. So the PSD is where you're going to be working with all the texturing, the Photoshop document. You can place it where you want, essentially, but I like having it in the source images directory. So in the source image directory, all the images that go directly into the material will be placed. But I also like having the actual Photoshop document there, because then when I'm saving files, it just goes to that folder. So this is going to be called crate. Just crate with layers, PSD. That's sort of the master document where I will be working with all the texturing. So again, for larger projects, you might want to consider doing iterations on the PSD, like the master file where you're doing all your texturing. So then I can do Control A just to select all the pixels, Control C to copy, and then go back to this document, Control V, and paste that in there. So this was just, yeah, I don't remember the image resolution, but my total image resolution is 2K. So it's 2048 by 2048 pixels, right? That's what I saved out the UV layout as. If I go here, image size 20, so pixels, 2048 by 2048. So it might sound like a lot, I don't know, but it's not really, because each of these, depending on how well you really maximize UV space, you see that when I start scaling this guy down, it's no longer really so high res. Okay, so what I want to do is place the UV layout on top. So if you have, in this case, it's a black UV layout with white lines, then I can use the blending mode screen. Just going to remove the black and show the white lines on top. So it's kind of hard to see, but it's there. If you wanted to make it more clear, I can just copy this more times. It will see that it makes it brighter. And then maybe Control E And screen. Now it's a little brighter. That's it. It's just really to get that under there. And then click V for the move tool. So who here is pretty new in Photoshop? Okay. So no worries. Next time will be devoted to Photoshop. But I want you to try this today. I can click M for a rectangular marquee selection, and I can do selections. And if I go there and I'm on this layer, I can click backspace. That will delete from the layer. So I'm just deleting these unwanted parts. Yep. Okay. Then I can copy this and move it over here. I can hold Shift when I start dragging it. That will drag it in a straight line. And then I can remove unwanted things from this. There we go. Okay. So now this is where we're building up the color map, right? So I'm going to save the document. This is saving the PSD document. But then I also need to save out a file to attach to the material. Before I do that, you need to turn off the layout so that doesn't go on top of the color map. And then I probably want to add just a neutral backdrop here, so I don't leave the invisible. This is just transparent, right? So I make a new layer, put it underneath, and then maybe just like a gray. When we're building the bump map, which we'll be doing later on, we're going to go in here and set it to precisely 50% gray. So might as well try that, and then fill that layer. Okay, fine. Then, keep working. You can build out the color map for the crate. Let me just copy these guys quickly. Drag both of them to the new layer icon, and then press V. I access the move tool, and I can hold Shift and just drag it down. And I'll do it again. I can also use, when I'm in the move tool there, I can use the arrow keys to nudge things around. Okay, so let's see what this looks like. So I have a lot of layers. So what I like doing when I'm working on the color map, and eventually we'll be doing a spec map, bump map, but I'll take all of these and I'll select all, drag them into the folder icon and call this color. But I'm keeping my own structure, right, in Photoshop. So this is what I'm saying, like here eventually I'm going to go in and be very creative. I'm going to add different things, make some weathering effects and stuff like that. That's what we're going to be looking at next time. So that's what I like, not using the networks. But if you want, you can try it. Yeah. Okay, and then turn off the layout, and then this is the little thing that we have to do. Now just save out an image. So in CG, a lot of people use targets or TIFFs. So these are non-compressed image formats. So you're not getting any quality loss. The files are larger, but you're getting more quality. A lot of people also use JPEGs in CG and PNGs, which are both there's a compression, but the compression is very good. So I challenge you to see the difference, in a render. Oh, that's a JPEG. No, you're probably not going to see it. But for displacement maps and bump maps and things, maybe you want to opt for a higher format. But in any case, just to show you, this could be a simple, let's do JPEG, old school, nice JPEG. Huh? A GIF, let's try a GIF. No. All right, no PNG, more modern. but create underscore color. So for the naming convention of all the image files, we'll just add an underscore and we'll define what type of file it is. So this is the color map, underscore color. And save and OK. And then Maya. Now we'll make a new, we'll go to the hypershade. And this time we need to make a new material. So did we talk about the difference between a Blinn and a Lambert?
Briefly.
Yeah, so let's do it briefly again. Lambert, it's just a Lambertian type of surface, which means it's kind of like chalk or something. With it, the reflection is very diffuse. So the light is just, the reflection is very diffuse. There's no highlight. Whereas the Blinn has more of a specular highlight. You can see the highlight. Different types of reflection. They're both very simple materials, but we'll be using the Blinn for our texturing purposes in this course. It's a great little material to get started with texturing, also because it just updates very nicely in the viewport. Where did all my stuff go? There it is. Where? Okay. Oh, I docked the hypershade. Okay, undock that. Okay. All right. Blinn. Let's attach the Blinn. I can double click it. I can name it something. This is going to be crate. Material. Oops. And then go to the color tab, file node. I'm going to turn off the filter type. Click here. It should go automatically to the source image directory, where I will find crate color PNG. Open. There it is. Beautiful. All right. So then, what's going on? It's looking great. But why is it looking great? It's just because we matched everything up nicely. So if I click here in the UV texture editor, you'll see the underlying image. This is just to view it. And then let's mess up one of these faces just to try it. So that's one way to orient yourself here. You can go to face mode and just hover over, and you'll see it also hovers over here. Okay, so that's that face. Okay, great. Let's try to mess it up. So we'll introduce some texture distortion. Oh no. This is what happens if your UVs are poorly laid out. Right? So the texture is not great. Oh, I should mention this. So sometimes I see students, when you start UV mapping, you'll go in and add a texture, and then after you like having the texture there, just nudge the UVs to fit the texture. That's not how this works. You can do it, but you don't want to do that. The first step is UV mapping using a checkerboard pattern. With the checkerboard pattern, you also submit a checkerboard pattern render in your reflection paper for this assignment 3 to show minimal texture distortion. And then you start texturing. UV mapping comes first. Okay. So if things are looking horrible, it's probably because there's texture distortion. Okay, so any questions to that process? Yeah.
Are there any problems if you were to have both tries and quads on the same model and try to then map it and then texture couldn't be any problems?
No.
Okay, thanks.
No problems. No. Technically, if you have a try, technically it's all tries. So if you have it's just like a workflow thing. Keep everything quads. It's nice to work with. You arrive at a beautiful topology, and everything is in the end is actually tries technically. So if you have tries and quads, yeah, there's no problem. You don't want n-gons. I mean, technically it's going to work, but we don't want n-gons. It's not an optimal solution. especially if you're subdividing and things, right? Other questions? Okay. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. It's not simple. I'm not going to say that. Doable. Doable is a nice word. Oh yeah, so so now if I wanted to make changes, so back to your point with the PSD network, the idea behind the PSD network is pretty nice because the idea is that you would just change the PSD and then you'd update it, and then there's this link between Maya and Photoshop. Yeah, okay. If it worked, but it doesn't always work.
The fun thing is when Maya crashes and you haven't updated it yet.
Yeah, it's not optimal at all. Actually, it's not good. Where's the new show input connections? I just want to show you that it's not so different, because we can just right click here. You right click the file node. So here's the material, right? All right. So this is the material. If we click here, this is show input connections. It's going to show everything that's going into that material. And it's going to graph it down here in the work area. And then this is the material. You see something's going into the color. This is the file node. This is the place 2D texture node. Okay. We'll get back to this guy. But this is the file node. And you just right click and there's a reload image file right there. So the way this works, then you'd go back, you make some changes. Let's do something quick. We'll do a hue saturation adjustment layer. Just do something like that. And then I'll save out a new color. Or you don't save out a new file, you just overwrite the old one, right? So save, you want to replace it? Yes. Okay. And then you go back to Maya, and then you just reload. Right click, reload. And now we have old crates. Great. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll just get back in here, and we'll see what we'll do. But this is basically it. But let's take a 10-minute break. Come back. See you in 10 minutes. All right. So Diego had a question, which was an excellent question, because it reminded me of something we were supposed to cover in this lecture. And that is, what if you have multiple objects? Which you always have, well, in a lot of cases. For the chair, for instance, if you have all the legs as separate objects, and then you have the pillow, and then, you can have any number of objects in an asset. We don't want, we'll also come back to this, but I wanted to mention it. We don't want, we'll look at it tomorrow in the lab, but we don't want an UV layout per object. It's very, very inefficient. So for an in-game mesh, usually the most common thing is to have everything condensed in one image, one UV layout. So, like with, we won't be looking at it in this course, but there's something called PBR materials, so physically based rendering. The materials today are getting really great. So you can do with like the same material, you can use it for like 98% of your material needs. So it could be anything, like any metal, any cloth, anything that you do. All that you're altering are the image maps, right? So that means everything can be fitted into one single UV layout, and you can use that to make an infinite number of. It would look very different. but it's the same, physically said the same material. Does that make sense? So like now the blend is a material. So if I had this singular asset, and there were some parts of it that needed to be gold, and some parts of it needed to be glass, and some parts of it need to be wood. Very, very different type of characteristics in the material, but it can all be done through altering the image maps. That means everything can be fitted into one UV layout. You don't need to have a lot of different materials, because you can use the same material and just change it by texturing. Okay, so but just to prove a point here, so here, let's say we want to add an additional object here. So then let me just make another cube. I'm just going to add something to this guy. Let's add a small little, maybe it's a plank. So whatever. So then what you always want to do also, I forgot to mention this, but before you start UV mapping, you obviously want to make sure you freeze transformations, delete history. This is important. Otherwise, you might have some artifacts when you do the mapping. All right, so I'm going to do the same for this guy. So I'm going to do, just go to so that, again, we have the default layout for the cube. Then we can just go UV and do an automatic mapping again. So now I want this, oops, I'm not going to do anything to the mapping. Let's just say this is nice, it has UVs. If we apply the checkerboard, you see there's no distortion, the textile density is even, it's nice. And then I can delete history. So I'm done with the UV mapping, then I delete history. I want to get rid of that node in there that's still active. Deleting history is very important. So I want this plank to be a part of the same UV layout as the rest. So what's the first thing I need to do? What's the first order of business? Now they both have UVs. The UVs are fine. Any ideas? Okay, do I need to combine them? That's a good point. No. So a lot of people think that you have to sort of go in here and combine. So if they're supposed to be in the same layout, you need to combine. No, you don't need to combine them. Any ideas? Apply the same material, so that helps. So if they both have this material, so that's the start. But there's one thing I'd do first, right? So I would apply the checkerboard first to both of them and make sure they have the same textile density. I'm just applying the same checkerboard material to both of them. And then I'm going to make sure this has the same textile density more or less as the rest. Currently you can see that the checkerboard on the plank, they're smaller. What does that mean? What does it mean if the checkerboards are smaller? Yep.
It has a higher textile density.
Exactly. It has a higher texture resolution in this case. So a higher. It's not a matching textile density. Exactly. Because the UVs are occupying more space in UV world. So then I go select all the UVs. So I'm just right click, select all the UVs, then go to scale, press R, and then I just scale them down. And now I'm matching, you see, matching the textile density. So this is no artwork involved, this is a purely objective thing. I just need to match More, like I said, more or less. It doesn't have to be like rocket science, because it's going to be off by maybe a few pixels. Doesn't matter. Relatively the same resolution. Right. Okay, so that's sort of the first order of business. So there, that's taken care of. And then I always like to delete history all the time. Then, okay, so I don't want to change the placement of these UVs because I spent a lot of time placing them and they're matching the texture we made. But I want these to be a part of the same layout. So what I can do, first I can just grab these UVs. I'm going to be careful not to scale them because now I'm done with the scaling. I've taken care of they're even the same scale, same resolution. So I can work anywhere I want. I can move these over here, just put them there. And then I just select both objects, so shift select both objects. Then I can see the UVs. And this is how I work. So now the work is just, it doesn't matter if these are separate objects. I prefer having them as separate objects. I will never do this. I won't go in there and combine objects. The only reason for combining objects, what I do that for, is when I need to combine them first to merge them together. If they're not, I just prefer having them separate because they are separate meshes. That's okay. And then if I wanted them structurally when I'm working, I would just do a group. So, all right, so I can shift select both. Click once in the UV texture editor. Oh no, I docked it. Don't want to dock it. Go out. There you go. UV toolkit. Go away. Okay. So then just select UVs and I can just move them here. I'm going to go to UV shell, so I can select shells. Maybe. Why do they move all the buttons? It used to be rotate buttons. No. Anyway. Maybe I can hold. No. Okay. It's probably a part of that new toolkit that I just hid. Show UV toolkit. Oh, here are the align buttons, it seems. No. Yeah, okay, so here they are under rotate. I can rotate in 90 degrees increment. Then, whatever, just place these a little closer together. Doesn't matter. And there we go. So maybe I can fit them all here. Yeah, it seems like I can. Fine, perfect. So there's, that's it. Makes sense, right? And then I have a new layout. This is a layout. So all I need to do is select both objects, make a UV snapshot again. And this will be, I'm just going to call it out UV2. Okay. Now we have an updated JPEG. Let me open that. Control A, Control C to copy, Control V to paste that in there. This is my new layout. I'm going to set it to screen. That's it. And then I can continue texturing. I'm going to delete the old layout. So I'm going to save the PSD document. I'm saving everything. And then I'm back into the color. Maybe I can use one of these guys. Just copy one of the layers. Yeah, so you get the idea, but here I'm just going to quickly use the same layer. So, like I said, next time we're going to dedicate the session to Photoshop. So, since a lot of you probably, so a lot of you hadn't tried it, so too much. But obviously, the Photoshop is less technical, but it's more time consuming. You know, if you're painting the textures, is something really time consuming, I'd say. I can select both layers, Control E to merge them together. Yeah, so I have a strange ghost thing there, it doesn't matter. Let me get rid of this. So yeah, so I could have spent time with this, which I'm not going to do. I can also hold Alt-Shift and just drag to the side when I'm in the move. That will automatically just make a copy of the layer and move it. And let me just add a few pixels there for the end parts. Control T, I can transform and then start rotating. I can hold Shift. Just leave that there. And then get rid of the extra parts. Alright. There we go. Turn off the layout. So I'm saving the PSD document. It's going to save all the changes to the entire document. Then I'm also saving out the new color map, which was a PNG. Just save, replace, yes. Okay. And then I go back to my app, and I need to apply the other material. So create material, just middle mouse button, click and drag. So now they both have that material. It seems like it's okay, but that's just, oh, maybe it updated it already. Yeah, it did. Okay, so it already updated it, which is nice. If it didn't update it, I would have to click the material like I did and go show input connections. Then I can right click and hold over the file node and say reload image file. It's going to reload it. So you see, there you go. So now it's already updated, and we can see in here, yeah, there it is. So these UVs are technically perfect. There's no texture distortion. Everything is in 0 to 1. I don't have overlapping UVs per object. Right? That's it. But so another point is you can have multiple objects sharing UV space in the same asset. In other words, let's say this asset, which is a crate, but the asset comes with these planks because I want to have some planks. Maybe it's inefficient. Let's say if I have 5 planks. It's pretty inefficient in terms of texture usage if all of those planks needed to have their own texture. I can use the same texture for these planks. The same goes for chair legs or anything. If you have multiple objects in an asset, you can obviously share texture space. You don't have overlapping UVs per object. This is my asset. I have 3 objects sharing the same UV space, which is perfectly fine in a lot of cases. So if you have a lot of objects in an asset, like the chair, if you have the chair legs, do you really need a separate texture for each of the chair legs? Are you really going to notice? No, probably not. It depends on the chair. But if it's a circular leg especially, you can rotate the one a little bit to offset it so it's not so obvious. No one's going to notice that it's the same texture. So that means sometimes it's actually really inefficient to have in this case, you can see that, well, it doesn't matter because I have a lot of unused space. Yes, if you have a lot of unused space, then I could have used that unused space. So I would have had a different texture for each of the planks. Okay, but the point here is, no, you want to maximize the UV space, and this comes into it, like the planning. Is that becoming clear? So the way this works then, like I said, I don't have to combine these. I don't want to combine them. Because this could be animated, you know, I can like blow things up. I don't want it. It's not combined. They're separate meshes. I can group them. Control G. This is now my crate. Crate underscore 01. Then I'll have another one over there. Or not. Oh. Okay, so the way to sort of quickly do this, yes, I can group them, but I can also, a very nice quick way to select, I want to see the UV layout. Quick way to do that is to right click and hold the material. So the material, I named it crate material, right? So if I right click and hold, I can select objects with material. Then I'll get the UV layout. There it is. So this also means in the same asset, you can have multiple layouts. Okay, so all of this is a little mind-boggling when you start out, always. It's like, what? Yes, you can. Don't have to combine the objects. They can be separate. Nice way to arrange it is just to name the material. These are all sharing the same material. And that's what I was saying, like the materials, this is a very simple material. And the PBR materials that we might talk about in a future occasion, they're also simple to work with, but they're technically very, very advanced. So with the same material, you can make it look like it's any type of metal, any type of, yeah, anything. 97% of cases. So, which is great. So you can have, the only way you would change it up is with your texture maps, your image files. Right. So do we have any questions for this? Was this clear? Should I repeat something? All right. All the UVs are in 0 to 1. There's no overlapping UVs per object, but I do have some objects sharing UV space. Right? Okay. So try doing this. Try having a multiple object asset and just try to wrap your head around it. First order of business was I added the checkerboard. I wanted a uniform textile density. Second order of business, organize everything into the same quadratic layout. Right? So, because, you know, this could be like 100 planks, and it could still be the same asset. I could have planks over there. And I'm not adding to the texture resolution, which is great. So it's a very efficient way of working. This is, you know, again, mission critical for games, but also for VFX. You know, there's no reason why all these planks should have their own unique UV space. It would be very inefficient. Yep.
Make larger planks or larger crates and have the same general material, but you have to create a new. You can't just resize everything.
No, okay, so yeah, if you want something larger, yes, you would have to UV map that object to fit the same textile density. Okay, so the thing that's relative is the resolution. The thing that's not relative is the textile density. The textile density is set. So when I apply this blend, all these checkerboards should match. That goes for everything. So if I start just scaling this, it's not going to match. It's going to be too low res. If I'm scaling it, I need to UV map that piece. If I wanted a larger plank, I would, let's say, 0 this rotation, and then just grab the verts. When I grab the verts, you'll see that the UVs, obviously, they're not going to update, so we're going to get texture distortion. Okay, so, you know, sometimes, you know, this will look okay. If you have some texture distortion, depends on the texture. It's not going to, probably it will look okay. But we're talking about like optimal workflow. Okay. The optimal workflow is this. You want this to be precisely the same textile density as the rest. Then I would need to make UVs for this piece. So to make this quickly, I'm not going to UV map it, but let's just also scale the UVs for that piece. I'm just dragging those UVs out. So I'm making that UV shell larger. Now, then I go back and I select everything. And now I know that this piece, the UVs for it. Okay, hang on. Let me just move those out of the way. Or they could even stay there, actually. But just to make it more clear, let me move it out of the way. Let me move these to the other side. Okay, and then let's apply material. Now that's just gray because there's nothing currently there in the map. But then it'll be the same thing. Go back into Photoshop. You know, update the UV layout. Go back into Photoshop, paint it, update the color map. All right. Does that make sense? All right. Yeah. So, other questions? It's a little confusing, but it's also kind of brilliant because when you make an asset this way, you're not, you know, it's still relative. You can have any texture resolution in the end. So that's why I recommend you work at a higher resolution than what's your final output. So even if you're making a little tiny crate for an in-game background asset, I can go into the same PSD document and, you know, or actually in this case I would open that little PNG, which is this one, and then we could do image size 512 or something. But I'm working in 2K. I would recommend working in 4K, so 4096, and then just down resing. So I'm outputting this to 512. This is the tiny texture. Let me save that. That's going to be crate color underscore 512. Now we can compare them. So let me just copy this guy. And let me make a new material. Blend. And this will be crate low res or 512 material. And I will attach the color 512. And there you see, when I'm in here, that resolution won't hold up. Right? Then I need this. But you know, this is even if you want a little 512 thing, don't work in 512. Work in 4K. It's gonna improve the results, or at least 2K would be my recommendation. Does that make sense? Now, and you know, for you game people, game engines will do this automatically using like a level of detail, and it would switch between different resolutions depending on the distance. So point is work a bit more high res. Yep.
How would you do this for circle? How complicated?
Yeah, not today.
Okay, not today.
Tomorrow. No, but this is the same process. This is what you need to wrap your head around today, because this is the confusing part. Okay. Okay. What we're doing tomorrow is going to be more complicated objects, like, because then rather than spend a lot of time and noodling around. Okay. Before you have these algorithms that, for instance, we're going to look at tomorrow, UV mapping was a nightmare. It would take a lot of time because you would do these projection-based things. You can imagine, take a lot of photos of the object, and then you have to glue everything together. And then you have to make it look good, which means minimizing texture distortion, which is very hard to do when you have a three-dimensional object that you're making flat. Then there's going to be texture distortion. A UV solution with no texture distortion would be to just have every single polygon flat spread out. Then you have zero texture distortion, which is also possible, and we can do that, but then you need more 3D texturing approaches. So now all we're doing is we're making paintable UVs, which are great, because then you can do things in Photoshop and do whatever you want. Yeah, so then, so we need to look at that tomorrow. Then we're going to open up another, this software called Hedis UV Layout. So literally, this is just great, because you literally select the edge and cut it cut it open, and then the unwrapping, the flattening is automatic. So it's just, this has been a lifesaver for anyone who's doing CG. But now they're getting these tools finally in Maya. And currently they've not been up to par with Hedis, but maybe they're getting better. So you can also try them in Maya. All right, other questions? Okay, so I will see the VFX people in the lab in half an hour. If there are no further questions, we'll take a break. Okay, thank you.